Is India embarking on a new beginning? Raghuram Rajan, the new governor of the central bank, has promised a dramatic remaking of the banking sector, among other reforms, and elections next year hold out the promise of a change of government. So where is it all leading? Lionel Barber, the FT's editor, was in the country last week, and he's here now to tell us about what he saw. Lionel, you saw Governor Rajan. We've heard a lot of promises from Indian politicians in the past, and it tends to get bogged down in politics and bureaucracy. Is it any different this time?
Well, Governor Rajan is a remarkably impressive individual. He comes from University of Chicago, a big academic background, but what was striking was how obviously determined he was to translate words into action. And if you look at how he handled the rupee crisis this summer, early intervention plus taking on business interests by raising rates in order to deal with inflation, that's impressive.
And he's an impressive person, as you say, but one thing he said when he came in was, look, I can't do everything. The central bank can't do everything on its own. Does he have the power and the personalities to get the rest of government on his side and on the same message?
I think he's very focused on what he can do as central bank governor, and also looking at what there is existing legislation, for example, on the Companies Act, to make sure that those provisions already on the statute book are actually enforced, implemented. It's not a case, therefore, of some new, vast new legislative program.
Right. So
he's also very clear that he wants, for example, more competition in the banking sector, and second, he wants to make sure these big conglomerates actually take some of the downside when they get in trouble with their stakes in investment projects.
Right, and a lot of these companies are facing quite severe problems, aren't they, with indebtedness and so on. Did you feel that there was any sense of urgency about tackling those kind of problems?
Well, I was in Mumbai, I was in Delhi, I was also briefly in Gujarat. But in Mumbai, where I spent time with the very wealthy businessman plus the central bank governor, it was very clear to me that there was a sense of urgency and making sure that India got back on track. I think the worst point was actually last year, sometime last year, before the rupee crisis, when they had to change the finance minister and really things were drifting and a welter of corruption trials or cases.
Right, and are things going to, you think things have stopped drifting now? We've got elections coming up next year, prospects of change there. What do you think is the best case scenario that could come out of that?
I think if you go to Delhi, there is still a sense of becalmment, drift. This government is manifestly coming to an end. The Prime Minister, who's a very serious economist, he's been in power for a long time. There's some questions about how much he's pulling the strings, and therefore a bit of exhaustion. One of the phrases was, this government is in office but not in power, which is what they used to say about John Major's government. And I think now, all eyes are on the election. What's going to happen? Is it going to be Mr Modi from the BJP opposition party, the chief minister in Gujarat, or will Congress somehow cobble together a coalition and go in for a third term?
When you look around the EM world, you can see countries that are in a similar situation in a way to India, with problems that need tackling, with elections coming up and the prospects of change. And in some countries you can imagine a best case scenario. Is that the case in India? Do you think there's a real sort of prospect within reach of something big changing?
Well, I'm cautious because India obviously has a very complex federalist system. The centre has some powers, but the states have a lot of power. And also it's a very complicated ethnic patchwork. So any government that comes in has to deal with multiple coalitions. So we're not going to see necessarily great action, but I sense a degree of purpose. People want things to change, and that's very, very clear. And that, of course, it's certainly handing at the moment the initiative to Mr Modi in Gujarat.
Yeah, that can make all the difference. I can't let you go. You were there for the last test match with Sachin Tendulkar. You saw him play. How did the crowd react? What did that tell you about India?
Well, I think all viewers to the FT need to be aware that I was actually also testing consumer sentiment in the cricket ground, a good gauge for the economy, but it was an amazing, tens of thousands of people cheering Sachin Tendulkar. I watched an unbelievably impressive straight drive past the fast bowler to get his 50, and I think maybe the fact that he got to 74, not a century, but still a good score, tells us that maybe we should be a little bit more optimistic about India in the medium term.
Bit of macro in the micro. All right, thanks very much, Lionel.